Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us. I have a very dear friend that's not feeling well, and I do what I do. I cook. Since she's needing a little added potassium, I made a big pot of potato soup. Now this is a true soup, not a chowder, not a stew. I'll tell you the difference as we go along. In the meantime, give us a thumbs up if you will, and subscribe. And if you hit the little bell icon at the top, you'll get a notice when I post new videos. Let's make some soup. So I'm going to make a lot, so I'm starting with a great big pot. This is 7 quarts. So I'm melting a stick of butter, and I'm doing it at a low heat because I don't want any browning from this. And I'm going to make, I'll call this a modified mirepoix. A mirepoix is basically 1 part carrots, 1 part celery, 2 parts onions. And what I'm making here is more onions than that. This is probably 4 parts onions and 1 part carrots and 1 part celery, or even a half a part of each of those. Anyway, a little bit of carrots and celery and a lot of onions, all of it fine, chopped very finely. And I'm just going to cook this slowly for only 3 or 4 minutes, just long enough for the onions to get translucent, for the carrots and celery to soften a little, for them to start letting that flavor go. If you're not familiar with the term mirepoix, I'll put it in the info section. But this is basically an aromatic. The purpose of it is to create a flavor base that supports the whole dish. By definition, a potato soup is simple, doesn't have a lot of ingredients, and can be bland. And we don't want it bland, so we're going to make the flavors just a little more varied. So a teaspoonful of salt on top of these vegetables helps them let go the flavors, the aromas, and to wilt easily. And in this dish, I'm going to go ahead and add some finely ground black pepper. And that's enough for me. You may want to add more. I will say add pepper to taste. So we've got a little sizzle going on this now. You can see it. I want to make sure I don't let the temperature get too hot. Don't want any scorching. So that's a half teaspoonful of garlic powder. I have little tiny measuring spoons in my spice jar, so that's a half a teaspoonful. Then I added a 1/4 teaspoonful of cumin. Cumin really brings a great flavor, but it's easy to overdo it. So that's a 1/4 teaspoonful, and we're going to stop with that. So I'm going to stir all that up. You can see that my onions are getting translucent and soft. Not going to caramelize them, just going to let them get soft. And already the smell, the aroma, you know this is going to taste good. So I'm just breaking it up, let it sizzle a little. And then I'm going to add the potatoes. I have here 3 pounds of potatoes. It's just regular Idaho potatoes. And I've cut them into about 1/2-inch pieces because I want them to cook quickly. And yes, I'm adding the potatoes before I add any liquid. That's just to help develop their flavor in with the mirepoix. Gonna let a little of the salty flavor get in there. And I'm going to use no water in cooking these potatoes. I don't want to leach any of the potassium out or any of the other good nutrients that are in potatoes. I'm going to cook them in chicken broth. And I'll be honest with you, if I had had some bone broth, I would have used that, some stock. I'm going to add just a little bit more salt here. I don't have any bone broth right now, but I have plenty of chicken broth, and that brings its own nutrition to the dish. Now this is a lot of veggies, it looks like, and I said I would tell you the difference between a true soup and a stew or a chowder or a bisque. There are lots of different things that we think of as soup. True soup has a lot of liquid, generally broth. This will have broth and milk. The vegetables are not cooked mush. They're cooked to the point that they're still recognizable and separate. A stew is a thickened dish, and we're not going to thicken this at all. And a chowder is a stew with seafood, and so is a bisque. So basically this is a soup. It's going to be thin when we're done, but it's going to have a rich broth with the potatoes and the onions and the carrots and the celery. It'll be soup. So this is a quart of chicken broth. As I say, if you have bone broth or stock, they bring an added level of nutrition, but the chicken broth is good. And I'm going to stir this up and turn the heat down once I get a little bubble on it. Turn the heat down and cover this and let it cook for about 20 minutes until the potatoes are soft but still intact. So it's been about 20 minutes, and I'm going to get a little bit of this potato out just to check it. I want to make sure that it's soft. Nobody wants to bite into a hard potato. And yes, you can see the stage of doneness there. You can cut through them easily with this plastic spatula, but they're still intact. So I've still got my heat on medium to medium low, just enough to maintain a nice simmer. And then I'm going to add a pint of heavy whipping cream. You can use half and half. You could just use milk. But what we're trying to do is really add a nutritional punch to this. And you know, that's not just for somebody who is sick. You need to add a nutritional punch to everything you eat. And because I eat low carb, high fat is not an issue for me. And in general, the higher the fat content in food, the lower the carb content. So we're also going to add 2 cups of milk. And this is whole milk, not 2%, not skim milk, whole milk. And because this is a true soup with no thickener, I'm going to add a little richness by adding 4 ounces, half cup of creme fraiche. And you can add the same amount of sour cream, even though the taste is a little bit different. It's going to perk up the flavor, and it'll add mouthfeel, a richness when you take a spoonful. So now we have all of our ingredients in. I'm going to just stir this. We want to cook it now only long enough to bring it back up to good heat all the way through. There's a lot of dairy in here. We do not want it to boil at all. We just want it good and hot, and we want to give it a chance for the flavors to meld. So I'm going to have this on medium low heat, and then I'm going to just let this sit here and heat up, and I'll come back in a couple minutes to taste it for salt. With this much potato and dairy mixture, we're likely to need a little bit more salt. So it's good and warm here. I'm going to taste it. And at this point you can add more salt, more black pepper if you want it, a little more garlic powder. Now, this is about ready to serve, and we're going to do the loaded potato part in the bowl. But most of this is going to get frozen, and freezing dairy products can be problematic. Oh, I think I'm going to add some parsley flakes, just because. These are dried parsley flakes. If I'd had fresh, I would add that in the bowl. When you freeze heavy dairy products, they may separate. You'll just stir them back together when you heat them. So I've loaded this soup up with chopped green onion, some bacon, a big pinch of cheese, and I'm going to taste it now. Oh yeah, and don't forget, there's cornbread on the side. To me, potato soup goes with cornbread. And my friend that I'm making this for might be tempted to eat the potato soup if you have cornbread. So we just put a piece of cornbread right in the soup. And this is a substantial meal. It is packed with not only nutrition, it's packed with flavor. These potatoes are tastier for not having been boiled, for having been simmered in chicken broth. They've retained all the potassium, or the dish as a whole has retained the potassium. And we have everything here you need to get on the road to recovery and just to really enjoy a nice dinner on a cool night. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. I hope you make this recipe. I hope you like it. And I hope to see you again tomorrow.